clay and staying safe, we're going to jump ahead a little bit and sculpt and cure the eyes for our character. And the reason we want to move to that point now is if we sculpt the eyeballs themselves and just leave them soft, uncured clay, when we try to sculpt the lids over top, particularly we're using quite heavy lids on this, and I really want to pull this bottom lid down. If the clay is soft, it's really easy to distort that, and it's hard to get it back into shape once you've kind of, attached it into the socket. So if we use clay that's cured, even if we just cure it, part way, just so they are firm like these, then when we're sculpting over top of them, that gives us a hard surface to sculpt the lids against. And so that's what we're going to do over the next few minutes. So the other thing I want to introduce at this point is the effect that adding a little bit of flocking to your clay can have. It just keeps it from looking completely flat. Now, if you do not have a pasta machine, this gets a little bit tricky. It's a little hard to pull off. You can do it. You just need to stay committed to it, and you need to have nice strong hands. I'm going to use the pasta machine because it's faster. So here's a block of clay, a little bit of translucent clay. That's what I'll be using. It's not clear. It's a little bit translucent. It's a little bit buff colored, but it's not opaque white. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some red flocking that I talked about. I remember I had mentioned you can buy it under the nail art section in places like Amazon. And so it's really fine powder, and it's used to make like a faux. You can use it to make like a faux velvet surface. So I've just sprinkled a little bit onto this bit of clay. I'm just going to carefully fold it up, kind of squish it down so at least it's stuck. And I'm going to fold it. And here's where you have to be careful, because it can turn into a bit of a little zit like that will just pop and make a mess. So exactly like that. Just kind of be aware of that, kind of fold it in on itself. Good thing is the clay will just pick the flocking back up off your hands if a little bit sneaks out. So again, if you're going to mix this by hand, just keep doing the snake and braid. Make the snake, braid it over and over. 9 hours later, you'll have it mixed. It won't take that long. It's just tiring for your hands. But you can see it's starting to mix in already. In fact, that could be kind of cool. So I'm going to break off a chunk and just leave it partially mixed. Okay, then I'm going to take this bit and put it through the pasta machine to mix it thoroughly. You can see that tiny bit of flocking really pushed this into, it's really starting to look quite pink. It's maybe a little redder than I wanted to. I might just incorporate a little bit more translucent. looks a little bit better. So it's not going to look like veins. It actually looks like a piece of lunch meat right now, but it just breaks up the surface a little bit, so it's not just that plain flat surface. So let me just put this aside. Let me peel off a chunk of this. We'll see how it looks. It might look a little bit goofy, but we'll give it a try. So when dealing with forms that you want, where symmetry is really important, and you'll see me do this over and over through this project, is take one piece and cut it in half, and then you have equal chunks to deal with. It's really hard. I find it very tricky to, particularly to make a sphere and then try to match it by sculpting another sphere. So if I just take these, the other thing I'm going to do is use my drawing, use my template as a guide. Now, I do want these eyes to be a little bit buggy, a little bit large. So for a regular human, that eyeball is probably a little on the large side. But I think for this, I think it's okay. So I'm just going to roll these up into spheres. Yeah, I don't mind. I'm not sure how well that's showing up, but I don't mind that kind of red marbling. That looks okay. Looks kind of bloodshot. I'm not sure how many more times I'm going to smack my head on the camera. We'll see. I'm just going to stand up and have a look at that. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad for the size. I do notice there's a really strong line there. I want to avoid that, so I'll make sure that's at the back. So next thing I'm going to do is use some colored clay, and you just need tiny little bits for the remaining portions. So if we think about the iris being the colored part of the eye, so I'm just going to use this this green. So because I have so much red in there, I'll use green as a bit of a complementary color. The other thing I was considering was having a yellow iris. I might still do that. So those tiny little bits are probably too big, because by the time I get them flat, well, maybe not. So I'm going to squish it back together and just tear a little bit off. When you're dealing with colored polymer, it's really important to keep a clean spot on your desk, because it will pick up every other color. Let's have a look at those. So now I want to make them as round as possible with tiny little movements. And I'm going to use one of these tools with the little steel ball on the end. I'm going to try to flatten this out. Without making it terribly distorted. It's a little bit wonky, but the lid is going to cover a lot of that iris, so it's probably okay. Now, anything you can find that's sphere shaped will work for this part. Again, you don't want it too thick because the iris, right, the parts of the eye, they don't sit on top of each other. But it's okay to make the illusion once it's in the socket and the lid is covering it. It'll look okay. The other thing that does is it does flatten the sphere out a little bit, the first sphere. But again, it's okay. If you want to, just roll up 2 spheres and just cook them, and then you can paint the you can paint the iris on afterwards. So now I'm going to take a tiny bit of black. You can use the end of a paintbrush or something for this. And that becomes our pupil. I'm going to purposely make one pupil quite a bit larger than the other, just so we can have a look at the difference. So in this one, I am going to sink it in there quite a bit. Okay, so we've got a couple buggy eyes. The last little trick I want to show is to take the tiniest bit of white or translucent. I mean tiny. Make the tiniest piece you can and then cut it in half. And then very carefully pick it up, and you can put it kind of just covering or just bridging the pupil and the iris, and it gives that a little bit of an artificial highlight. All right, that's pretty much it for eyes. I mean, there's 100 varieties of or different ways that you can do it. Again, if you want to just make a sphere for now, you can do that. So what I'm going to do is just show you very quickly how we cure polymer clay, a couple different techniques. And then we will move on to the next stage, next video. Just a quick note on curing polymer clay. As per the manufacturer's instructions, 275, 15 minutes for every 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters of thickness. If you're going to be doing lots of polymer clay sculpture, I really recommend that you get a separate oven. And what's also important is that you have a thermometer so you can see what the real temperature is, not just the temperature on the dial. A convection oven is best because it evenly distributes the heat. The other thing you can do is you can put your small pieces on a little piece of tin foil, wrap it up like a little tea bag, and boil it for about 10 minutes. I've also read about people using a heat gun to cure their clay. I have never tried it. Sounds like that would be really hard to be consistent. Might work. If that's your only option, then absolutely give it a try.